Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is to synthesize the most crucial, compelling, and often contradictory insights from a stack of sources, giving you the clearest understanding of a complex subject.
And today, we are undertaking a deep dive into a figure who is, perhaps one of the most misunderstood icons of the 20th century.
Josephine Baker.
Right. When you think of Josephine Baker, the image is often stuck in one place.
The banana skirt?
The short skirt made of bananas, the high-energy star of the Paris Jazz Age. It's an electrifying, iconic image, but it acts like a kind of visual camouflage.
Camouflage for what?
It hides the staggering complexity of the woman who is also a French military agent, a World War II hero, and one of the most vocal civil rights activists of her era.
That's exactly right. So, for this, we've synthesized the single, comprehensive biographical source detailing her entire arc. Our goal is to extract the definitive narrative, moving beyond that famous dancer persona to reveal her full stack of accomplishments.
It's an incredible stack. Born in crippling poverty, celebrated by figures like Picasso, used her fame to spy for the Free French.
And then became a true global pioneer for racial equality. It's an extraordinary life.
And to frame it properly, I think we have to start with the fundamental tension that defined her choices. She famously said, "I have two loves, my country and Paris."
Right.
And that quote sets the stage perfectly for her conflicting identities, born in America, rejected by America, and ultimately embracing the nation that celebrated her. That tension, it fueled her entire adult existence.
That choice of citizenship, that ultimate betrayal of the country of her birth is something we have to explore. But to understand why she made that choice, we have to go back to the very beginning.
We have to go back to the deep shadow cast by St. Louis.
So Josephine Baker was born Frida Josephine McDonald on June 3, 1906 in St. Louis, Missouri.
Right. And the circumstances of her birth weren't just poor. They were shrouded in a mystery that allowed her later in life to essentially invent herself.
Okay, tell us about that mystery. We know her mother was Carrie McDonald, but her father. The sources suggest the truth was far more complicated, right?
Precisely. While some later documents named a vaudeville drummer Eddie Carson as her father, that's based on later family stories, the strongest speculation among the family, which Josephine herself kind of adopted, was that her biological father was actually white.
A wealthy man.
Possibly a member of a wealthy German family her mother worked for, but her mother refused to ever discuss it. This ambiguity, this idea that her heritage was already contested and obscured, it becomes an early theme in her life. It's sort of a blank slate upon which she could later paint her own identity as a global, multiracial figure.
And the economic reality of her childhood made any notion of a stable identity secondary to just survival.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The family lived at 212 Tardy Street in the Chestnut Valley neighborhood of St. Louis, and you have to understand, this wasn't just low-income housing.
Yeah.
The sources detail that these were often rooming houses and apartments that utterly lacked basic necessities, most notably indoor plumbing. So she grew up developing what you might call a ferocious set of street smarts. She was often described as poorly dressed, perpetually hungry, and she had to scavenge for sustenance.
I read she used to hang around the railroad yards.
The sources vividly describe her hanging around the railroad yards near Union Station, learning how to dance for nickels and picking up scraps of coal. It's this powerful image of resilience, a child learning to perform for survival.
That early life wasn't just defined by scarcity, but by outright trauma and really exploitation.
To help her family survive, by age 8, Josephine was working as a live-in domestic for white families in St. Louis.
And this is where the cruelty of segregation becomes so personal, so intimate.
It is. The biographical source provides a shocking detail of abuse. One mistress who employed her physically burned young Josephine's hands as punishment.
For what?
Because she used too much soap while doing the laundry.
I'm
Imagine being 8 years old and subjected to that sort of punitive violence over a bar of soap. That trauma is a direct psychological root for her later uncompromising stance against segregation. It taught her early on the sheer inhumanity she was fighting against.
The trauma was both personal and systemic. Just 3 years later, in 1917, when she was 11, she witnessed a defining moment of American racial terror.
The East St. Louis riots.
Right.
This event, which killed dozens and displaced thousands of Black Americans, left an indelible mark. She recalled standing on the west bank of the Mississippi River, watching across the water as the glow of burning homes illuminated the night sky.
She could actually see it happening.
She heard the screams and saw the terrified families fleeing across the bridge with nothing but the clothes they wore. This wasn't something she read about. It was a physical, terrifying spectacle. She said this memory made her run and run and run.
That terror becomes, you can see it as the foundation for her later political absolutism. She didn't just disagree with American racism, she feared it. She abhorred the violence it produced.
And so, by age 12, she was done with formal schooling. Her early escape routes were, well, they were quick marriages.
Very quick. She married Willie Walls at 13.
A union that lasted less than a year. Then, in 1921, at age 15, she married William Howard Baker.
And that second marriage also ended quickly. She divorced him in 1925, but she kept his last name professionally for the rest of her life.
Yeah, and that's a key decision, isn't it? It was a utilitarian choice that gave her a new professional identity, shedding the Frida Josephine MacDonald of Targhee Street, St. Louis. The name Baker stuck, and with it, the legend could truly begin.
So using her newly acquired name and just this ferocious ambition, she left St. Louis for New York City.
And lands right in the middle of the vibrant Harlem Renaissance. She reportedly badgered a local show manager until she was finally recruited for the St. Louis Chorus Vaudeville Act.
From there, she gets in some major Broadway revues.
Yeah, after performing at the famed Plantation Club, she landed a role in the chorus line of the hit Broadway revue Shuckle Along in 1921, and later in the Chocolate Dandies. But here is where her professional genius first emerged.
No, sir.
She understood that being a young black woman in a crowded chorus line meant being easily overlooked.
So how did she break through that anonymity?
She refused to accept it. The sources detail her brilliant tactic. She was positioned at the very end of the chorus line, but she would purposefully ad-lib.
To stand out.
To stand out. She'd inject spontaneous comedy, cross her eyes, execute sloppy, exaggerated movements. She made herself the comic relief, engaging the audience directly and making it impossible for them to look at anyone else.
And that improvisational energy, which was kind of stifled in the rigid American mainstream, was exactly what a certain European capital was hungry for.
And that capital was Paris. In 1925, at age 19, she sailed across the Atlantic for La Revue Negre. And she later said that her career-defining moment wasn't Broadway. It was this move to France.
It's a critical distinction. In America, she was in the background.
In Paris, she was the main event. She arrived at a time when French culture was experiencing this tremendous shift. Her opening show on October 2, 1925, featured her performing the Dance Sauvage.
The routine where she appeared practically nude.
Right. And this explosive, immediate success was perfectly timed with the 1925 Exposition des Arts Décoratifs, which introduced Art Deco and a fervent European interest in African art and non-Western cultural forms. They were seeking the primitive, and she delivered a stylized, electrifying version of it.
It sounds like Paris was ready not just for her performance, but for the idea of her.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a job, it was a cultural phenomenon. She set the standard for the jazz age. This led directly to her headline acts at the Folies Bergère starting in 1926.
And that's where the moment that truly cemented her international fame happened. The costume for the 1927 revue, Au Vent de Folie.
The famous banana skirt. We have to focus on that.
We do.
That specific costume defined the entire era. It consisted of a beaded necklace and this highly suggestive short skirt fashioned out of 16 rubber bananas.
It was deliberately provocative, shocking,
and instantly iconic. It symbolized the supposed liberation and daring of the Roaring Twenties. But what's often forgotten is that this costume, this stereotype, was something she very quickly seized control of. She became a master of self-parody and brand marketing.
She certainly embraced the celebrity. She was immediately given these incredible, almost mythical titles.
The Black Venus, the Black Pearl, the Bronze Venus, the Creole Goddess. And her admirers weren't just the masses, they were the intellectual elite of the age.
That's a key point.
Think about the power of this. Ernest Hemingway declared her the most sensational woman anyone ever saw. Picasso was captivated and sketched her. Jean Cocteau befriended her, promoting her image in the most sophisticated artistic circles. They saw her as a muse, a symbol of freedom, not merely an entertainer.
An acceptance that gave her immense social capital that she never would have accrued in America.
Never. And she rapidly leveraged that capital. You mentioned branding before it was formalized. The sources list a dizzying array of products she endorsed.
Everything from cosmetics to shoes.
But perhaps the most famous was Baker Fix hair gel. designed to achieve that sleek, lacquered look she maintained. She was building an empire around her persona, monetizing the exoticism that France had gifted her.
Speaking of exoticism, we have to talk about her stage companion, Chiquita.
The cheetah.
Yes. It sounds less like a supporting act and more like a high-risk theatrical element.
It was pure, unadulterated spectacle. Chiquita was her pet cheetah, dressed in a diamond collar, who often accompanied her during performances. Now, this sounds glamorous, but the sources emphasize the chaos inherent in the act.
The cheetah would escape.
Chiquita frequently panicked or got bored, escaping the stage and leaping directly into the orchestra pit.
Wait, a wild animal loose among the strings section? That must have been terrifying.
Terrifying, yes, but magnificent for the audience. The spectacle went from planned erotic dancing to a moment of uncontrolled suspense and danger. Baker would often command the orchestra to keep playing as the cheetah wandered, or she would calmly retrieve it.
She turned potential disaster into heightened entertainment.
Exactly. She made her shows not just performances, but unforgettable, nerve-wracking events. She understood that risk, controlled risk, was magnetic.
Her early success was built on this raw, untamed energy, but her career longevity depended on transformation. The shifts started around 1929, largely thanks to her partnership with Giuseppe Pepito Abatino.
Abatino, her manager and lover, who brilliantly posed as a count, he was actually a former Sicilian stonemason, was instrumental in professionalizing her image.
He saw that the wild dancer persona had a shelf life.
He did. Under his guidance, she began the difficult, pivotal transition from dancer to vocalist. She began singing professionally for the first time in 1930.
And that transition cemented her integration into French culture, didn't it? It culminated in her signature song of the era.
J'ai deux amours. I have two loves.
Released in 1931. The lyrics perfectly captured her life at that moment, stating she loved her country, meaning her adopted France and Paris. By adopting the French language and French standards of performance, she completed her assimilation.
But the true test of her transformation from petite danseuse sauvage, that small, wild dancer, to what was called La Grande Diva Magnifique came in 1934.
With her role in the opera La Querelle, this was a major calculated risk. Opera was the pinnacle of classical French entertainment, the antithesis of the Folies Bergère.
So she committed to a 6-month run, which required months of intensive vocal training.
And a complete overhaul of her stage presence. This wasn't just singing, it was proving she could inhabit the most demanding and conventional role in French theater. She was actively trying to shed that exotic image that initially made her famous.
She sought respectability.
Exactly. Shirley Bassey, who looked up to Baker, noted this transformation, highlighting that shift from a figure of novelty to a respected, magnificent diva. It was proof that she could succeed entirely on technical merit, not just spectacle. And at the same time, she was becoming a significant European film star.
Yes, but again, only in Europe. 4 European-only films. The silent film Siren of the Tropics established her core cinematic narrative. The journey from the primitive jungle to the sophisticated Parisienne.
Then she starred in major vehicles like Zuzu and Princess Tam Tam.
Right. And these films solidified her position as an A-list star, but that stardom stopped abruptly at the shore of the Atlantic.
This is where the narrative pivots so painfully. By 1936, Josephine Baker had achieved everything in Europe.
Everything.
And she decided to attempt a triumphant return to the United States to star in the revival of the Ziegfeld Follies on Broadway. She must have expected adulation.
She expected the country of her birth to acknowledge the international star she had become. The result was, well, it was heartbreaking devastation.
It was a commercial failure.
She was commercially unsuccessful, the run was short, and it culminated in her being replaced by Gypsy Rose Lee. The American press, unlike the Parisian intellectuals, was brutally racist and unforgiving.
What specifically did the American critics say? I mean, how bad was it?
The criticism was vile. Time magazine published a review that directly and hatefully referred to her as a Negro wench, claiming her dancing and singing could be topped anywhere outside of Paris.
Oh, wow.
Other critics dismissed her technically, calling her voice too thin and dwarf-like, claiming she lacked the presence required for a major Broadway house.
So, after finding freedom and respect in France, she returned to her homeland only to face the same systemic humiliation she had fled in St. Louis.
The rejection was total and deeply personal. And the source material emphasizes that this devastation directly precipitated one of the most significant decisions of her life.
She formally renounced her U.S. citizenship.
Right. She married French industrialist Jean Lion in 1937 and officially became a French national. This was more than a marriage. It was an act of profound political protest and emotional self-preservation. She chose the country that valued her humanity over the one that dehumanized her.
And we should briefly touch on her entrepreneurial spirit here, because she was constantly trying to establish footholds.
She was relentless. The original Chez Josephine Cabaret was a gift in 1926, but she tried an ill-fated New York venture in 1936.
The one with the piglet.
The one with the tiny snorting piglet in a crate on opening night, a chaotic attempt to inject European flair into America. It failed.
Yeah.
These business attempts just underline the difficulty she had in finding acceptance in her homeland.
And her early exposure to fascism in Europe also solidified her loyalty to France before the war even began.
Indeed. In the late 1920s, on her European tours, she faced outright hostility in Germany and Eastern Europe. She was targeted by stormtroopers who threw ammonia bombs at her during a performance.
So having experienced that kind of raw, organized hatred, her decision to align herself completely with France against Nazi aggression was, well, it was a moral and political inevitability.
Which brings us to this next chapter, which is maybe the most astonishing of all.
This is where her story transcends celebrity. The transformation from a global entertainer to a secret agent. In September 1939, when France declared war on Germany, Josephine Baker was immediately recruited by the Deuxième Bureau.
French military intelligence as an honorable correspondent.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Isn't that counterintuitive? Why would they use the most famous woman in Paris, a celebrity whose face was instantly recognizable across Europe, as a spy?
That's the genius of it. The sources make it clear that her fame wasn't a liability. It was the perfect cover.
The perfect cover.
She socialized with the highest-ranking officials, Japanese, Italian, and later Vichy bureaucrats, at exclusive embassies, ministries, and nightclubs. These men would never suspect the woman who was entertaining them, who was the subject of endless gossip, was actually collecting critical intelligence right under their noses.
So she was working with Jacques Apte, the head of French counterintelligence in Paris.
And she could just charm secrets out of men who believed they were far too clever to be spied upon. She collected granular intelligence on German troop movements, airfields, strategic harbors, just by observing and listening at high society events.
The actual spycraft she employed reads like something out of a pulp novel. I mean, it was incredibly high stakes.
The boldness is breathtaking. She couldn't risk carrying official documents, so she resorted to the most personal methods, writing crucial notes on her own hands and arms, or pinning them strategically inside her clothing and underwear.
But the most iconic method involved her primary professional tool.
Her sheet music.
Her sheet music.
Yes. She leveraged invisible ink, writing intelligence directly onto her song sheets. Think about the audacity. She was carrying military secrets on her music for Jeux des Amours. If she were searched, the guards would find only sheet music.
But it was actually troop locations or airfield coordinates.
Exactly. Written in lemon juice or milk. It's a powerful symbol of how she weaponized her own art.
And we need to emphasize she wasn't just a social collector of gossip. The sources note she took an active military role. She had a pilot's license.
That's a detail that often gets overlooked. She flew missions. She was literally engaging in aerial reconnaissance. And when the Deuxième Bureau was forced to go underground, her contacts escalated. She moved from reporting to Abti to reporting directly to Wilfred Dunderdale at MI6 in London.
She was a crucial node in the Allied intelligence network.
Truly.
Once the Germans invaded in 1940, her operational base shifted entirely. She left Paris and relocated to her home in the Dordogne region, the magnificent Château de Milhaud.
And she turned a picturesque country estate into a strategic resistance headquarters.
It became a hub of covert activity.
She installed a radio transmitter to maintain contact with Free French and Allied forces, stored weapons in the cellar, and, most importantly, sheltered resistance fighters and Jewish refugees who were fleeing the Nazi occupation.
And this came at immense personal risk and financial cost.
Absolutely. The sources note she didn't just provide shelter, she personally subsidized the entire operation. She paid for food, clothing, and the creation of forged documents. This wasn't passive support, it was a total costly commitment that showcased the depth of her French loyalty.
Her global fame, which initially made her a spy, then made her the perfect courier.
Right. Using the pretext of ill health recovering from pneumonia, she began touring neutral nations.
Places like Portugal, South America.
Carrying vital intelligence that could then be transmitted to England via Lisbon, often still concealed on those innocuous sheet music pages. Her identity as a famous entertainer was the perfect explanation for her constant travel. No one questioned the diva on tour.
In 1941, her focus shifted to North Africa, operating from a base in Morocco.
Her primary role shifted slightly to morale and logistical support, though she was still doing intelligence work. She organized tours to entertain British, Free French, and American soldiers stationed across North Africa.
And this was critical because the Free French forces didn't have an organized entertainment structure like the USO.
Exactly. And her commitment to the war effort over commercial gain was absolute here. She operated independently, charging no admission, and strictly barring civilians from attending her shows.
The focus was entirely on the troops.
Entirely. However, this period was also incredibly taxing on her physically. She suffered a devastating health crisis in Morocco.
Following a miscarriage.
Following a miscarriage, she developed a severe infection, peritonitis, which quickly advanced to sepsis. She required an emergency hysterectomy and spent months recovering. It highlights the immense physical and emotional toll that her wartime commitment took.
She was essentially operating as a soldier, suffering the hardships of the field, even while performing.
And that staggering commitment was recognized after the war. She received the highest honors France could bestow.
The Resistance Medal, the Croix de Guerre.
And she was named a Chevalier of the Légion d'honneur by General Charles de Gaulle himself. These honors permanently elevated her status in France from a celebrity to a national hero. She earned the title Agent Josephine, confirming that the playful exoticism of the banana skirt was merely the disguise for a steel-spined patriot.
With the war won and her status as a decorated hero confirmed, Baker returned to the U.S. in 1951, leveraging her French honors as a shield.
And she didn't hesitate to apply the same fearlessness she showed in the resistance to fight segregation at home. Her return immediately sparked public battles. Her first engagement in Miami involved fighting to desegregate the nightclub audience.
And she won.
She persisted until they relented, successfully integrating that space. That early victory set the tone. She received KKK threats over the phone, but she publicly stated she was unafraid, dismissing them as cowards hiding behind hoods.
She followed this with a sold-out national tour. Her triumphant momentum culminated in Harlem, where she was honored with a parade and named the NAACP's Woman of the Year.
The Nobel Peace Prize winner, Ralph Bunche, personally gave her a life membership. She was at the absolute height of her influence in America.
And that influence was viewed as a direct threat by conservative power structures.
Which leads us to the infamous Stork Club incident in Manhattan in October 1951. She was refused service at the upscale club due to her race. Her reaction was immediate. She sought out Walter Winchell.
One of the club's regulars and crucially one of the most powerful conservative columnists in America, she expected him to publicly champion her cause.
But the reality of Cold War politics hit hard. Winchell didn't help. He attacked.
What does he do?
He unleashed a cruel and devastating public counterattack, accusing Baker of being an anti-American communist sympathizer. This was the McCarthy era. Such an accusation was the most potent weapon available to silence a dissenting voice.
He successfully reframed the incident.
He shifted the conversation entirely away from racial discrimination and turned it into a loyalty test. And that political smear campaign had almost immediate, crippling consequences for her career in the U.S.
It was fatal. The negative publicity, fueled by those communism accusations, led the U.S. government to terminate her work visa.
She was forced to cancel all remaining engagements and return to France, effectively exiled from the country for nearly a decade. The FBI also opened a file on her and tracked her activities overseas.
But the sources show she was unwavering, continuing her activism from abroad.
She refused to perform for segregated audiences. She constantly leveraged her influence overseas to shine a spotlight on U.S. discrimination, making America deeply uncomfortable on the world stage. She also personally intervened in specific cases, like writing letters to the governor of Mississippi asking for clemency for Willie McGee.
A black man convicted of rape on highly dubious evidence.
Right. Despite her international appeal, McGee was executed in 1951, a painful reminder of the limits of celebrity activism.
Her enduring legacy in American civil rights culminated in 1963. After nearly a decade of being politically banned, she returned and stood alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington.
That moment was critical, not just for the movement, but for her personal redemption in America. She deliberately wore her Free French uniform, proudly displaying the Légion d'honneur medal.
She was showing America, you rejected me, but France honored me for fighting fascism. Now I fight your injustice.
And she held a very unique, highly respected position on that platform. She was the only official female speaker that day.
Wheelie one.
She used her time not only for her own address, but to introduce a contingent of Negro women for civil rights, making sure to acknowledge and honor figures like Rosa Parks and Daisy Bates.
And her speech perfectly synthesized her entire life's experience of injustice versus adulation.
It's the speech where she delivered the famous, powerful line, "I have walked into the palaces of kings and queens, but I could not walk into a hotel in America and get a cup of coffee, and that made me mad."
And when I get mad, you know that I open my big mouth. And then look out.
Because when Josephine opens her mouth, they hear it all over the world. It's a concise and brutal indictment of American hypocrisy.
Her recognized status within the movement led to an extraordinary offer later, following Dr. King's assassination.
After King's death, Coretta Scott King approached Baker in the Netherlands and asked her to take her husband's place as the leader of the civil rights movement.
Wow.
It was a testament to the moral authority she had built. Baker considered the offer for days, but ultimately declined, stating that her 12 adopted children were too young to lose their mother.
Which brings us to that complex private commitment, the Rainbow Tribe.
Her greatest social experiment.
What was the motivation behind adopting 12 children from such diverse backgrounds?
Her explicit motivation was ideological. She wanted to prove to the world that children of different ethnicities and religions could grow up together as brothers and sisters in harmony. She truly believed this family could be a blueprint for global peace.
So she adopted children from all corners of the world.
Japanese, Colombian, Finnish, French, Algerian, Ivorian, Venezuelan, and raised them in both the Catholic and Muslim faiths. 10 sons and 2 daughters. It truly reflected her globalist vision.
But the experiment was fraught with contradiction.
It was. While the intention was noble, the reality of running the massive Chateau de Milan with 12 children was financially ruinous. Furthermore, her foster son, Jean-Claude Baker, later reflected on the contradictory nature of their life, noting that she wanted a doll.
There was an element of performance in the family life, too.
And that performance was literal, wasn't it? To manage the immense costs, she arranged tours of the chateau, charging visitors admission to walk the grounds and actually watch the children play.
So the Rainbow Tribe became part museum exhibit.
Part museum exhibit, part social experiment, which certainly complicated the children's experience of growing up. The financial burden eventually overwhelmed her, leading to her eventual heartbreaking loss of the chateau.
And this is when Princess Grace of Monaco stepped in.
The former Grace Kelly who stood by her during the Stork Club incident. She offered her an apartment in Roquebrune to live in when she was near bankruptcy.
And despite founding the family on principles of tolerance, there were deep personal struggles within the tribe itself.
The sources reveal moments of profound pain. She famously forced her Finnish-born adoptive son, Jerry, to leave the chateau at 15 after discovering he was gay.
That seems like a huge contradiction.
It was a deeply painful chapter, highlighting the limits of her own progressive ideals. While they eventually reconciled, it was a major fissure, and the sorrow continued later in life. Her son Moïse died of cancer, Noelle developed schizophrenia, and Jean-Claude Baker, who carried on her legacy, later died by suicide.
So it was a beautiful vision, but a difficult, complex reality defined by both love and profound loss.
Absolutely.
Despite the financial ruin and personal heartbreak, Josephine Baker staged an incredible final chapter, a grand finale to her performing career that affirmed her status as an eternal icon.
In 1975, she starred in a retrospective review in Paris titled Josefina Bobino, 1975, celebrating 50 years in show business. The production itself was a testament to her enduring global influence.
Because it wasn't just financed by French patrons.
No. Prince Rainier and Princess Grace of Monaco, along with Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, were among the high-profile financiers. This wasn't merely a show, it was an international, celebrity-backed tribute to her life.
And the opening night was legendary.
A monumental event. The audience was a who's who of global celebrity. Sophia Loren, Mick Jagger, Diana Ross, and Liza Minnelli were all there. The show opened to rave reviews.
A definitive, magnificent triumph.
And tragically, that triumph was short-lived. Just 4 days after the glittering opening, Baker was found in a coma in her bed.
Surrounded by the glowing newspaper reviews of her show.
She had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and died peacefully on April 12, 1975, at the age of 68.
The French response was extraordinary, cementing her place not just as an entertainer, but as a national figure.
Her funeral was a monumental national event. She received a full Catholic funeral, and the procession drew over 20,000 mourners. And here's the fact that truly defines her unique bond with France. Josephine Baker remains the only American-born woman to receive full French military honors at her funeral.
The only one.
She was buried later in Monaco, but that honor was expanded significantly decades later.
In 2021, she was posthumously inducted into the Panthéon in Paris.
The secular temple dedicated to the great men of the French Republic. By becoming the first Black woman inducted, France fully claimed her as one of its defining citizens.
And since her actual remains stayed in Monaco, the induction involved a symbolic casket. The symbolism is incredibly powerful.
It is. The casket installed in the crypt was filled with soil. But not just any soil. It contained soil gathered from the key places that defined her geography. St. Louis, where she was born in poverty.
Paris, where she found fame and freedom.
The south of France, where she operated the resistance. And Monaco, where she was interred. This symbolic burial created a final synthesis of her global, conflicted life.
Her cultural impact continues to resonate deeply in the 21st century.
Absolutely. Think about her influence on modern celebrity. In 2006, Beyoncé replicated the banana dance costume and has consistently cited Baker as a major influence.
And Angelina Jolie cited the Rainbow Tribe concept as a model for her own multinational adoption philosophy.
Right. And her story is reflected in other media, like Lynn Whitfield winning an Emmy for portraying her. And her impact extends to pure commerce and daily life in France.
The euro coins.
Yes. Perhaps the most tangible, modern sign of her legacy came in March 2024, when her face appeared on the French 20-cent euro coins. She has transitioned from a historical figure to a symbol embedded in the economic and cultural identity of the French nation.
So the narrative of Josephine Baker is this profound lesson in reinvention and resilience. She took the stereotype thrust upon her, the exotic dancer in a banana skirt, and wielded it.
That persona became her shield, her disguise, and her weapon in the fight against fascism and segregation. She was a true global citizen who seamlessly blended the worlds of high art, counterintelligence, and unapologetic political activism.
When we do deep dives into lives like hers, you realize the value of connecting personal trauma like the East St. Louis riots and the burned hands of a child to global action. Her personal choices were often forced by systemic cruelty, and she responded with immense dignity and sacrifice.
It leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to explore. Considering the virulent racism, the FBI surveillance, and the ultimate termination of her visa she faced in the U.S.
The country that was meant to be her home.
Versus the extreme loyalty, military honors, and eventual Panthéon induction she received in France, was her adoption of French citizenship the ultimate, most effective act of both self-preservation and political protest against American segregation.
Did her rejection by the U.S. ultimately enable her greatest global triumphs?